a victim of this, by the way, was Ted Cruz. All right, Larry Elder, Sean Spicer, thank you. I was in Texas this weekend. I was in Beaumont. I was in Houston with Ted Cruz. My interview coming up next. My brother, how are you?
Welcome to Texas.
Every liberal outside of Texas group is after you.
No, that's exactly right. I mean,
tens of millions of dollars they're throwing at you.
This is the most expensive Senate race in the country. If Democrats nationally could defeat one Republican on the ballot in 2018, it'd be me.
Yeah.
And so they're flooding tens of millions of dollars into the state of Texas. My opponent, Beto O'Rourke, last quarter raised $38 million.
Seems his agenda is the Democratic agenda that they're trying to keep quiet.
That's exactly right. And this campaign, in many ways, Beto is running a campaign very much like Obama did in 2008, where it was all hope and change, and the substance they wanted to keep hidden. Because, look, the substance of what he's embracing, the people of Texas don't agree with. I mean, he's campaigning on higher taxes, higher regulations, social medicine, socialized medicine, open borders, going after our Second Amendment, and putting left-wing radicals on the court. No. That's not Texas. Look, we have accomplished an enormous amount in 2 years, far more than anyone reasonably thought we could.
Biggest tax cut in history?
And the economic growth that we're seeing, the lowest unemployment in 49 years. The lowest African-American unemployment that's ever been recorded. The lowest Hispanic unemployment ever recorded. The biggest military rebuild since Ronald Reagan. I mean, the victories we're seeing are incredible. And this election's about two roads. If we have a good election, I believe we're going to. If we hold the House and grow our majority in the Senate, I think we can accomplish even more in the next 2 years than we did in the last 2 years.
We believe survivors! God bless you!
We watched you now twice run out of a restaurant. Then you look at the comments, Hillary Clinton, we can't be civil, kick them, Eric Holder, Maxine Waters.
There is an ugliness that's really scary, and I'm concerned it's going to descend into violence, that the rhetoric they're using is right on the edge of violence, and that's the next step. The problem is the left right now, they're so filled with rage that facts don't matter. They just want to burn it all down, and that's not good for our country.
Well, Senator, it's great to be at your town hall. Thank you so much for having us.
Sean, thanks for coming.
All right, between that, the mob, then, of course, you know, a dual justice system. Oh, and, yeah, open borders, sanctuary states. A lot at stake in 15 days. Let not your heart be troubled. Laura Ingraham, how are you?
Hey, Hannity, nice job in Texas. You look like, do you have your boots on when you were down there?
What did I? I didn't hear you. What did you say?
Did you have your boots on? You have, like, you know.
Of course I had my Texas boots. I got a pair
and...
of boots made for me many years ago in Houston that has the American flag and the flag of Texas. By the way, no state income tax. We are dumb. We're paying a fortune. Can we just move Fox to Texas or Florida? Oh, wait a minute. Gillenwood Room, Florida. That was the main. Let's wait till after the election. Hopefully DeSantis
That sounds
wins.
good. That Texas sounds good to me, Hannity. I'm ready if you're ready.
I'm in.
No problem.
I want a little baby ranch. I want to have like a couple of, you know, animals and take care of them.
Yeah, okay. So you'll be moving into an agrarian lifestyle. I'd pay to see that. Give me a break. That was a great show tonight, Hannity. Awesome.
Some people would be happy.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a great show.
All right. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from Washington on a very busy news night. The migrant caravan growing in size by the hour. One Mexican newspaper puts the number at a whopping 14,000 tonight. We're going to get exclusive reaction from the very people who defend our border throughout this hour. Plus, President Trump just wrapped a lively rally, raucous rally actually, in support of Ted Cruz. We sent our own Raymond Arroyo down to Houston to speak with the attendees. A lot of them lined up outside for hours. You do not want to miss what they say about this traveling band of, well, asylum seekers. And another story we're following tonight, Senator Cory Booker facing this strange sexual assault allegation, but it comes from an anonymous Twitter user who writes this long letter. We examine how Believe Everyone could seriously backfire on the Democrats. But first, mobile mobs highlight Democrats' tone deafness as Trump, the closer, electrifies on the stump. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Just as in 2016, there is no politician in America today who has a better read on what the voters want than Donald Trump.
What does the president understand that other politicians don't?
He understands the people. We are small business owners, and I think he gets that. He helps out the small people. He's doing what he said he was going to do, so that's why as Hispanics, we need to support him.
Tonight in Houston at a rally for Ted Cruz, President Trump had a massive crowd. Local reports say that 18,000 packed the venue, with thousands more stuck outside. But we're not just talking about excited rally attendees. The new data from NBC News out today may provide a strong indication that the Democrats' hope of a blue wave may be receding. Republican voters are outpacing Democrats in early voting in 7 key states: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Montana, Tennessee, and Texas. Democrats are leading in that area only in Nevada. And this is where the president's poll numbers are. His overall approval rating is as high as it's ever been. Today's MSNBC show should have been renamed In Mourning Joe.
Think about that. Nearly half of the people in this country approve of the job this man is doing, even after Charlottesville, porn stars, his humiliation in Helsinki, bowing to Kim Jong-un, ripping babies from their mothers, calling Hispanics breeders, destroying America's most critical alliances, and bankrupting our country. And we could go on.
Lions and tigers and bears. Oh, my. She ran out of breath there. The facial expressions and the demeanor, well, it looked a lot like, I don't know, election night.
I would submit that the acceptance of a deeply, deeply, deeply dishonest president, the acceptance of that among people is the single most important issue of our day.
But once again, from the cushy confines of their Manhattan studios, well, they don't understand the obvious. People across the country vote their pocketbooks, and they may just choose results over resistance. Republicans are trouncing Democrats by 15 points in the margin for handling the economy.
The top issue is the economy. 38% of voters said that's their top issue, and Republicans in this poll are winning on that issue by the largest margin, I think it's had in the history of the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. But in this NBC Wall Street Journal poll, Republicans win among those on the question of who's going to bring about change to Washington, which is a very strange dynamic for a midterm election like this.
And as Raymond Arroyo will explain later, the big issue on the voters' minds today in Texas was immigration, specifically the so-called caravan. Now, here's the Merriam-Webster definition of the word caravan. It's a noun. Well, you can have it as an adjective, but we're doing the noun. A company of travelers on a journey through a desert or hostile regions. Also, a train of pack animals. Secondary, a group of vehicles traveling together, as in a file. A covered wagon or motor vehicle equipped as traveling living quarters. What? That doesn't really work, does it, for what we're seeing here? The word caravan colloquially connotes something kind of fun, festive, desirable. Well, yet other descriptions come to mind among Americans and legal immigrants watching this all play out.
I'm a disabled veteran. I have to live in poverty, and yet these people can come walking across our border, and they're welcomed with open arms, and they're taken care of, and it's just a shame.
I'm a legal immigrant, and I support our president, and I'm against illegal immigration. Liberals, they just want these migrants to come here for votes.
I'm an African-American conservative. African-Americans are super against illegal immigrants. These jobs that African Americans used to do are taken over by illegal immigrants, and we love President Trump.
That's a pretty diverse group there. And sometimes reporters actually let the truth slip out.
Hundreds of Mexican federal police bearing shields and armor. But just as the migrants approached, the officers pulled back, setting up again 3 miles down the road and again retreating for the second time.
Por favor, escúchenos.
Mexican immigration officials pleading with them to register for asylum, but most kept walking.
Yeah, most walk right by. It's called wanton law-breaking. True refugees fleeing oppression will encamp wherever they can, away from their place of origin, which is dangerous. In other words, well, they'd stay in Mexico. On Friday, Mexico began registering hundreds of migrants, but most just burst past the barricades in flagrant violation of the law. Mexican police were also badly injured. Legitimate seekers of asylum, they must live in credible fear of government repression based on religious, racial, or ethnic identity. Home country violence and government corruption, as terrible as they are, and whether it's in Central America or anywhere else, are not sufficient bases for asylum, nor is the desire just to get a better job or live a better life, lest we in the United States be willing to welcome in hundreds of millions of people from across the globe, all on the U.S. taxpayer. So who are these migrants? Well, according to a Mexican newspaper, it's 14,000 in number, up from the initial 1,600 just last week. They're mostly working-age males. A far smaller number of women and children. You usually see them out in front. Many have friends and or family already in the United States, many of those illegal. Of course, they're impoverished with little to no English-speaking skills at all. They're from Honduras, Guatemala, and many from Mexico. Others, we don't know where they're from, and it's undetermined how many have documents at all, how many have health problems, or even criminal records. The president today told reporters to do some digging instead of just the gauzy, easy sob story reporting.
You know what you should do, John? Go into the middle of the caravan, take your cameras, and search. Okay? Search. No. Take your camera, go into the middle, and search. You're going to find MS-13, you're going to find Middle Eastern, you're going to find everything. And guess what? We're not allowing them in our country.
Well, one thing is clear. They know that there is protection in numbers, that if they flood the zone, they'll be able to overwhelm Border Patrol officials as they did in Guatemala and in Mexico.
The migrants on the bank of the Suchiate gasp and cheer as she is lowered to the raft. Si se puede, they chant. Yes, we can.
Does that sound familiar? Si se puede? Well, if it does, of course, it's because back in 2008, Obama, the candidate, actually stole that slogan from amnesty activists, I think here in the United States. Well, it's no wonder the mobile mob feels emboldened. After vowing not to allow them through Mexico, its police force is actually now providing an escort to the migrant caravan, if you can believe that. Now, does this sound like or look like something that most Americans think is a good idea? It doesn't matter where people come from, whether they come from Central America, Europe, any part of the world. If they come illegally, guess what? Most Americans think it's not fair. And Donald Trump knows this. Now, when he says he wants to stop this mobile mob, a lot of people calling it invasions, most Americans see it as not just an economic burden, and it is one, but a flagrant flouting of the rule of law as well. Of course, national security issues, health issues. And like Kavanaugh, it does come down to a basic sense of fairness. Not only would allowing this crush of people into our country be an insult to the millions of Americans who went through the legal process, how is it fair to those Americans who need assistance today and are not getting it? Like the 40,000 homeless veterans on the street on any given night. Trump knows that the answer is the following: America first. And that's the angle. Joining us to discuss is Art Del Cueto, a Border Patrol agent and president of the Border Patrol Union in Tucson. And Abel Nunez is the executive director of the Central American Resource Center. Abel, I want to start with you. In a perfect world, what do you think America should do with the 14,000 people approaching our border?
Fine, Lauren. How are you?
Well,
All right, we'll go to Abel first.
Well, I do think that currently we have existing laws that can address the issue at the border. These immigrants right now are in Mexico. They're not at the southern border. And we already have a legal structure that can deal with and vet them and make sure that those that have valid cases can be seen and those that don't will be returned back. We currently do that, and I think we should allow our system, our rule of law, to continue.
Abel, of course, near and dear to my heart you are, because you're from El Salvador, where I spent time in my early 20s, and I have a lot of friends there. Your family is originally from there. The problem is we have 700,000 cases pending now. People who've applied for asylum are supposed to appear before immigration judges. We have 40,000 homeless veterans on our streets right now, every night in the United States. What do you say to the American people out there who've given an enormous amount of money to Central America over the years, welcomed many people legally, like yourself, into the United States and your family? What do you say to those people who say, it's an economic burden for our country. We cannot help the entire world because we have corrupt governments elsewhere?
Well, it's not a zero-sum game. I think what we bring to the table and what immigrants have brought to the table to this nation is to make it strong. And I do think that there's a historical context that we need to also remember, that this nation has had a lot to do with the current conditions in those countries of origin. The fact that they're corrupt government in no short measure has been done by this government. They are supporting the current governments of the region.
I didn't have anything to do with it. Neither did President Trump. Neither did the people in public schools today who are dealing with overcrowded classrooms where teachers are trying to deal with kids who speak in Northern Virginia 12, 13, 14, 15 different languages. So with all due respect to the historical context, we got to deal with today and the limited resources that the United States has. But I got to get to Art Del Cueto. Art, CNN is calling this, this is just fear-mongering. This is not a problem. You heard what Abel said. We have the systems to process these people. Many of them, he believes, and others, they have legitimate reasons for asylum. How would you respond?
Laura, first and foremost, thank you for having me on. These individuals are not immigrants. These are people that are invading our country. My family, my ancestors are immigrants. These people are trying to enter the United States by force. You've seen the way, the pictures, you've seen the video. When you are kicking down gates to get into a country, when you are entering illegally, when you're trying to avoid inspection, and also when you are waving the flag of the country that supposedly has you so oppressed, how is that something that's beneficial for the United States? It isn't. These individuals, I've said it before many times, there is a humongous difference between knocking on my front door or kicking my front door and forcing entry into my home. And when you see the amount of individuals that are doing it this time, it's nothing else but an invasion by individuals into our country, and it needs to stop, and we need to do the right measures to go out there and stop it. When he's talking about the immigration issues and there's laws, what happens is these individuals will step on U.S. soil. They will check their records, and once we see that there's nothing of a bad record within the United States, keep in mind we can't check their record in the country that they're coming from. What happens is they're giving an immigration date, which they don't plan on showing up to because statistics show that less than 2% actually show up to these dates. And then they're free to be within the United States with no checks whatsoever. This is a humongous problem. These are not immigrants entering our country. These are individuals that are invading our country, and something needs to be done about it.
Abel, there's mostly able-bodied men, adult-age working men in this group. I mean, there are women and children, but the lion's share are adult-age men.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that point.
Well,
we have other information.
I'm just looking at the crowds. I mean, you can eyeball it just as easily as I can eyeball it. And how do you respond to people who would say, look, fight for your country? But you're waving the Honduran flag. I mean, you saw the flags as I did. They had them on the bridges. They had them when they're walking. Fight for your own country. I mean, you're leaving your country. You're an able-bodied man. That's what we did for our country. We founded our republic. Against all odds, the United States, we came out on top. We cast off oppression in our young republic. Why won't these young able-bodied men, not the women and children, but the able-bodied men, do the same?
Well, first, I think we need to also put another thing in context. The number of people that are coming historically is at an all-time low at the border. So this is not a new sort of influx of immigrants that are overwhelming
That's not
the
true.
system.
This has been an we have a
low.
38% increase of family units crossing the border just
from
this
that
summer.
specific region, but overall, all the numbers are down.
From Mexico, the numbers are lower. Central America is emptying out into this country.
Exactly.
Emptying out. Central America, Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras are emptying out. And the idea that this is a migration of asylees and refugees, Art, you can help me out. As if all at once everybody's oppressed.
No.
It makes no sense. You got one person in the United States who's helping organize this from Puebla Sin Fronteras, which is a guy who's been arrested within the migrant group. Art.
Laura, the truth of the matter is that for the month of August and the month of September of this last year, our numbers have risen more than they've risen in the last 8 years, I believe. So, no, the numbers have not been historically low. They're going back up, and a lot of the reasons they're going back up is because catch and release is still going on.
No, we're back.
The cartels know it's never stopped. The cartels know what's going on.
Yeah, all right, we got to go, but you almost can't blame the people who are doing this.
Against us.
Yeah. You almost can't blame the people who are doing it. Well, except for the ones who are injuring police officers. I blame them a lot because they're smashing them in the face.
The law
should be, well, guess what? They're violating the immigration laws of Guatemala, Mexico, and they're about to violate our laws when they don't show up at their hearings. But look, there are a lot of desperate people out there, but they're all around the world, and there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of them. We don't have the processes to take them all in. But I love having you on. We're going to talk more about this with Craig Shirley, because if you haven't noticed, the mainstream media are acting more like a PR firm for this, for this caravan of more than actual reporters. Now, this got me thinking: have we ever seen a moment like this in our country's history, where something like this would not just be accepted but endorsed? Joining us now to react is Craig Shirley, a Reagan biographer, a presidential historian. Craig, what in the world would our founding fathers think of what they're seeing today? Obviously, a young republic, different world, different time, but this is wild.
Yeah, but it's a great question, Laura. I'll tell you why. Because when they were crafting the Bill of Rights, and they came up with the First Amendment, it's all basically personal rights: the right of speech, assembly, worship, things like that. And kind of oddly jammed in there was the right of a free press. But the framers and the founders saw the broadsheets, and by the way, they hated them at the time. They hated the broadsheets. Jefferson and Franklin and Washington all wrote about how they hated the newspapers of the era, the broadsheets and the pamphleteers. But they saw them as a valuable ally of the people against the government. And it worked for basically 200 years. Lincoln imprisoned newspaper editors who criticized his conduct during the Civil War. Roosevelt complained about them. John Kennedy banned the New York Herald Tribune because he didn't like its Republican editorial policy. But they were basically fulfilling their constitutional obligation, which was to be against the government. Now you have a situation where they're aligned with in a far different manner, and that they're basically arguing against the rule of law and against for whatever you want to call it, but they're not behaving the way they were constitutionally mandated to do so.
Well, Craig, they're actually taking up the cause of individuals who just suddenly went from 1,600. They suddenly went from 1,600 to 14,000 because, again, everyone was oppressed at the same time. I mean, it's just the most ludicrous thing, and it's being run out of this group, Puebla Sin Fronteras, and other groups that are encouraging this and are working with other elements in the Honduran government, Honduran opposition, excuse me, and it's all being stoked for a reason. Part of it politics, and part of it they know they can overwhelm the system, and Donald Trump can try to do what he can, but I think Abel is right. I mean, these people are going to be coming in and say, I have a claim for asylum. Then what do you do? Real quick, Craig, close it out.
These are basically the Jacobins of the French Revolution now in the 21st century version. They are the stormtroopers of the deconstructionists who want to trample over the rule of law. You've got to ask yourself, what are they arguing for? Do they want freedom? We already have freedom. Do they want the rule of law? We already have the rule of law. Do they want justice? We already have justice. So it's something far deeper and darker that they're pushing for, which is to the destruction of American society and culture and the reordering of it in an oligarchy where the elites are on top and the rest are under their control.
All right, Craig Shirley, thanks so much. And we have the political aspects of this covered. Next segment is this backfiring on the Democrats?
Border security. Border security.
Why?
Because we'll not be a sovereign nation if we can't secure our borders. Period.
Is it cold? Looks cold in Texas there. When you hear voters like that, it makes you wonder, are Democrats really miscalculating the public's view of the mobile mob approaching the United States? And it's coming, of course, from Honduras through Guatemala and through Mexico all the way up to our southern border. To weigh in on that, we're joined by Citizens United President, Fox News contributor Dave Bossie, co-author of the bestseller Let Trump Be Trump, along with former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, Chris Hahn. Chris, let's start with you. What's the incentive for Democrats to, kind of fake these migrant numbers to the public?
I don't think there's any incentive. I think that this current wave of immigration plays perfectly into the Republicans' hands coming at the closing days of the midterms. I in fact, think it should be taken very seriously and could alter it. I've revised my House number down from 45 to 37 in the last 2 weeks, and part of that is 37 Democratic pickups, because most of it is because of this. And I think it weakens our chance of taking the Senate because it mobilizes and energizes the Trump base. This is their number one issue. This couldn't have been scripted better for Republicans, as if they planned it or something. This is something that Democrats should be very concerned about. That said, I think that the Democratic base is very motivated to get out and vote in this election. And I think when the Democratic base comes out, Democrats win because they're a bigger base than the Republican base.
All right. Irieno Mujica, I keep going back to this group, Puebla Sin Fronteras. He was arrested inside the migrant movable mob, okay? He was arrested because he was central to organizing the previous things I'm not calling caravans, if I can stop myself. He was instrumental in organizing those caravans. My question is, how is that like... That guy is the guy who is, I guess, somehow working for Trump secretly? I mean, none of this makes any sense. I agree, though, and Dave Bossie, with what Chris Hahn said, this is a loser for Democrats. I'm telling you, my radio show's been flooded. African-American callers, Hispanic callers, people in the middle, people who are not that political. They don't like this.
And that's the key to this. And Chris just actually hit it right on the head. It is the middle. It's not the Republican base. It's not the Democrat base. I think both of those are highly energized for this midterm election. It is going to be that soft middle voter who doesn't want chaos. They don't want the mob rule. And that's what they saw in the streets with the Kavanaugh hearing.
With
the Supreme Court. It's the exact same mentality that they have. They're repulsed by it. And I believe that Donald Trump talking about common sense issues and common sense solutions really have an edge here. And I do think this is a dogfight for the House, right down to the last seat. And I think we pick up several in the Senate now, whereas it was going to be 1 or 2 pickups. Now I think it's 3 or 4 net pickups in the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, the president's approval numbers are at their highest now,
at the highest,
which is
47.
Unbelievable.
And his disapproval is at his lowest. Wow. It's at 49.
Chris, in the faces on MSNBC this morning, I was joking that they should rename it In Morning Joe, because they looked... I mean, I almost felt sorry for them, but then I slapped myself. So I almost felt bad for them, but they look... They're prematurely morose about what they're seeing, because Trump's numbers are doing well, and the enthusiasm among Republican voters is higher than they would have hoped. It doesn't mean that the Republicans will win the House, but it means the bleeding might be stanched.
Well, one of the things I love about this poll is there's only 2 ways to run: unopposed or scared. And Democrats weren't scared until this week. They're scared now. So they're going to run a lot harder the next 15 days. And 15 days in a political cycle is a lifetime. And let me also point out that Ronald Reagan had a 61% approval rating in one of his midterms and lost 8 seats in the United States Senate. So presidential approval, while it is sometimes important, and I do think it helps Republicans that Trump's numbers are up, it helps them in some of these swing Senate states. I completely disagree. I think we're going to have a status quo Senate. If at most the Democrats are going to lose 1 seat. And I think the Democrats are going to pick up 35 seats.
Chris, you and I are making a bet. We're going to have to make
you're on. No. Well, I'm not going to predict. I have no idea what's going to happen. But I do know this. You can sense There's a feel. Like you get a, I got a
President
feel
Trump-
before the election.
President
2016, I have
Trump's
a feel.
rallies, what he is doing across this country, in barnstorming across this country, what he's going to be doing for the next 2 weeks, in talking about this great economy, talking about our national security. We are more secure at home and abroad.
More
than we've
women
ever been.
working. More women working across the
Look,
country.
the unemployment numbers are unbelievably down. Our GDP is up. Manufacturing jobs are back. This president has a record to run on.
David, I'm looking at these swing House seats, and I'm seeing nothing but good news for Democrats in most of them. I'm also looking at the state of Florida, and I'm seeing Andrew Gillum up by 12 points. I don't know how Nelson loses if Gillum wins by 12.
Yeah.
So we'll
Scott
see. We'll see how
Scott and
that works
DeSantis
out.
win. Look, you are correct. There are a lot of seats that are very interesting. We're trying to figure those out, same as you. But I think that on Election Day, we are going to come out of this in good shape. It is going to be 5 seats one way or the other.
Love more than a close contested election. This is going to be very exciting right to the end. That's what we live for in this business.
That's
I can't
what we
wait.
heard on election night. It was like, but like it wasn't. We kind of knew it was by like 11 o'clock.
We'll do the wrap up after the election.
Yeah.
You know,
and we're going to take it. I don't think that sits well,
The
people.
soccer mom, which is
it's
what
not,
it was
doesn't
called,
sit well.
doesn't want
we don't want to
Laura,
spend the money on it.
who
People
you
don't want to
sound
spend the
like,
money
Laura?
on this.
You sound like me in 2010 watching the Tea Party. I was completely wrong then. And I think you're wrong now. I think the Democrats are taking the House. And we'll even see. I have not written off the Senate, but I think it's pretty hard.
Oh, it's not even close.
Okay, the Tea Party. Let me just say, the Tea Party people were out there talking about like the marginal interest rates, and we're doing the thing with tax rates and Obamacare.
They were also,
these people are like smoking their marijuana. They're like wearing their tie dye like it's 1968.
There were some pretty rowdy crowds with the Tea Party showing
up. All right, guys, we're out of time. We're going to go to black. All right, coming up, what do voters think about the mobile mob barreling toward the U.S.? Well, Raymond Arroyo is in Houston at the Trump rally, and he was there interviewing people. He'll join us. Stay there.
Our country's being infiltrated, and the security that we're losing, and the lack of protection for our people.
Tonight's rally in Houston, Texas, brought out tens of thousands to see President Trump speak in support of Senator Ted Cruz. With the border crisis intensifying ahead of the midterms, we thought it important to send our own Raymond Arroyo to speak with some of the folks in the crowd tonight. Here's some of what he found.
What's the most important issue to you as you go to vote?
Probably the border.
Why?
Because our country's being infiltrated.
Keeping the House and the Senate so he can move ahead with his agenda.
I would say the economy. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody needs a job. And so I think that's who has the better economic policies in place to help people move on up in the economic ladder.
As an immigrant, I came here, I stood in line, waited for my turn, and finally got here. And that was a privilege.
Makes a mockery out of what my parents had to do in Panama.
My parents and my husband are from Mexico, and when they came over here, they did everything legally. We went through all the steps, paid everything we had to pay, and we just don't think it's fair for all these people just to come in and automatically think that they're able to get citizenship or the things that we are supposed to have here as citizens.
What do you think of this caravan we see? What should the president and the Congress do?
Send the Marines, send the military to the border to secure our border. You don't know how many people are good. I'm sure a lot of those people are good people, but we can't risk the bad people coming in with the good.
Mexico should have stopped them. You know,
they didn't.
They didn't. They should have. They should have stopped them, but they didn't. So now we got to stop them.
Build the wall. Make our country great again. I mean, we have to be careful. There are so many people coming, and I really feel for those families. But they have to come in the right way.
Would you leave your doors unlocked and just let anybody walk into your home? No, I don't think so.
And Raymond Arroyo, Fox News contributor, best-selling author of the New York Times Will Weather series, joins us now to tell us what else he discovered. Raymond, God, there were a lot of people at that rally. Now, where were some of them from? Were they all Texans or?
No, Laura, everything's bigger in Texas, including rallies. There were people from New York. I met people from the Upper East Side of Manhattan, people from Maryland, Florida. They really came from all over the United States. But think of that, to get on a plane, to come in for the day, just to hear the president. It tells us something about the excitement out there and the energy. And let me tell you, when the president started talking about these border issues, the chants of build the wall went up, and they were deafening. It was amazing to be in that room, I have to tell you.
Now, Raymond, I noticed that you happened to speak to a lot of Hispanic Americans today, and some from Central America, some from Mexico. What were you most surprised about what they said was the most important issue to them?
Laura, I was blown away. To a person, they mentioned immigration and the crisis at the border. And most of them had personalized this. You heard some of it at the top in those thoughts, where they said, wait, I came in legally. I waited. We got sponsors. We had to get people to sponsor us. We needed jobs and a place to live. We went through hearings. We can't just have people crashing the border. For them, it's extremely personal. And to hear this sort of breaks against the narrative, totally cuts against the narrative we're hearing in the media, that Latinos want open borders or relaxation in those border policies. Quite the opposite I found here. And again, these Latinos were from all over the Southwest and the South. They weren't just Texans. But that was the big takeaway for me.
You know,
that
Raymond,
and a call for unity, Laura. They want unity. They want the country to come back together. That was fascinating.
Well, you know, Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor, I know he was recognized tonight, as was pretty much every Republican congressman and the senators, of course, Cruz.
And Louis Gohmert.
And Louis Gohmert, yeah, I love that. But Dan Patrick has said consistently that not only is he tough, and Greg Abbott, the governor, on immigration and the border, but they get a disproportionate percentage of Hispanic voters because they are growing the economy, you know, the low taxes in Texas, tough on crime. And he said, Laura, this issue works. We can expand the base of the Republican Party. I think Dan Patrick is 100% right, and Trump has demonstrated that. The question is, Raymond, who's beyond Trump? Who's after Trump?
Yeah, well, that is the big question. And when you see a turnout like this in a midterm election, think of this. This isn't a president at the zenith of his powers or a president, you know, on the stump just out of the gate. This is a guy people have been looking at and listening to for 2 years.
Oh,
to
the
get
media
the
have been
turnout
trashing
he had tonight. Laura, there were tens of thousands of people outside who couldn't get in. Some of them went home. Some of them stood out there and watched on the jumbotrons. And you had almost 20,000 people in the hall. It was quite an event. And the reaction, it was almost like being at the Republican National Convention where we were. It was at that clamorous level. And you heard the president riding the tide of the
All right, Raymond
excitement.
Arroyo, fantastic job for us down in Texas. See you back in Washington. We'll have more on the looming crisis at the border later in the show, as the border chief from the Laredo sector in Texas joins us exclusively. But next, Cory Booker said we should believe all victims, whether they're anonymous or identified, during that Kavanaugh fight. But does he really want to live by that standard? The new accusation facing the senator. Next.
She shared a raw and visceral, incredible, a profoundly powerful testimony with this committee and the world, and she was believable. I believe her.
That was Cory Booker on the unfounded accusation against Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Well, our question tonight, does Booker still think everyone should be believed? We asked that tonight because a bombshell allegation from an anonymous Twitter user accused Booker himself of sexual assault. We don't raise this issue because we automatically assume it has credibility. I don't like anonymous allegations. We actually think everyone should wait for the details to come in before we say something like this, right?
Is this the right person to sit on the highest court in the land for a lifetime appointment when their credibility has been challenged? Not whether he's innocent or guilty. This is not a trial, but ultimately, have enough questions be raised that we should not move on to another candidate.
Joining us now with a reaction, Monica Crowley, a Fox News contributor, and Leo Terrell, a civil rights attorney and radio host. Leo, now we don't lend much, if any, credence to anonymous accusations without any more detail. I think if you're going to make an allegation like this, you got to put your name to it. But can you see the danger of the believe everyone mantra that was created on the left during the Kavanaugh saga, especially as espoused by Booker himself?
Well, I don't see the similarities between this anonymous person who I'm willing to go on your program and give this person legal representation if he comes out. So I want to take him to the police department so he can give a full confession, and I'll represent him. But please, Laura, let's not compare this. Yeah, he's saying that he's accusing Cory Booker, but please, let's not compare this person with Professor Ford, who came out, who spoke. well, whatever. He's making an accusation. He's accusing. I'll give him free representation because I don't believe it. It's a smear campaign.
Monica.
Well, if this accuser wants to become public, and I believe we should respect an accuser's wishes on this, unlike what the Democrats did to Christine Blasey Ford. But if this accuser chooses to become known and put his name to this allegation, then, Laura, I think there ought to be an FBI investigation. We're talking about a sitting senator who just a couple of weeks ago in the Kavanaugh context talked about how all accusers should be heard and should be believed. Well, in this case, it should be relatively easy to investigate, right? The accuser is saying that this alleged incident happened just a couple of years ago, not 40 years ago, like with Kavanaugh. And there should be witnesses, whether or not they can place the two gentlemen together in the same place. We should either be able to verify this or not pretty easily. But by Cory Booker's own standards, this must be investigated.
Please, are we? I just want to make sure, Laura and Monica, are we equating this anonymous person with Professor Ford, who came before the Senate, willing to take the FBI, show this? Are we making the equivalence?
Yeah,
yes.
Leo, let me just refresh your memory. NBC actually ran with the anonymous accusations. Remember, they were like, well, an accuser number 4, an accuser number 5. I felt like they were selling Ginsu knives. It got so ridiculous. And I'll throw in I'll throw in a set of, Tupperware. It was the most ridiculous thing. Our point is, I don't like it when people do this kind of stuff. I believe it is a smear. I mean, if you're going to make an accusation, this is supposedly a man making an accusation of something happened in a bathroom. If you're going to make that kind of accusation, you better put your name to it. Our point is a simple one. Our point is a simple one. We have major media outlets during Kavanaugh rolling with this anonymous stuff. And you had people like Cory Booker out there tarring Brett Kavanaugh because of the mountain of evidence, which ended up being nothing. And the American people are reacting to that in the midterms. I got to get to Avenatti, though, because it kind of, relates to somewhat, because he was out there during Kavanaugh. Avenatti now has been, suffered 2 embarrassing court losses earlier today. One ordered him to pay $4.85 million to former lawyer who argued he was underpaid. And then shortly after, another judge ruled that his staff and he were to be evicted from their offices for not paying rent for 4 months. Monica, Avenatti characteristically says, it's false and fraudulent and he doesn't know anything. And
yeah, sure. Well, Laura, it turns out that the guy on whom the left has pinned so many of their hopes, turns out he's a world-class grifter. And apparently a serial tax evader because he owes the IRS millions of dollars. And companies he controls, including his law firm, also owes the IRS millions more in unpaid taxes and judgments.
Oh, that's all Trump set up. President Trump set him up.
You know what? And now what I find fascinating, Laura, is some on the left now, because he blew up the Kavanaugh situation with the unfounded allegations that he was some sort of gang rapist.
Well,
how
about this?
Yeah, hold on. Leo, you're not going to endorse Avenatti early, are you, for 2020? He's not your kind of guy.
Laura, I'm not endorsing Avenatti, but I'm simply saying, hey, give the guy a chance. He has the right to appeal. He can make a settlement. Yes, he has a judgment against him, but that doesn't make him a bad person per se. And no, I'm not endorsing him.
Who hasn't been evicted every now and then? And come on, it's rent.
Or paid millions in back taxes.
Wait. I think I'm going to have to lend him some money if he can't pay for his rent. Maybe he should stop going on all these TV shows and start earning an honest living. I appreciate it, guys. President Trump,
you guys have destroyed him.
President Trump was mocked for saying we don't know what kind of people the migrant caravan that's comprised of. But is he wrong? The Laredo, Texas Border Patrol chief joins us next to tell us who they've scooped up just in the last year. Oh, go away. Joining the caravan that's headed up through Mexico toward the U.S. border. His critics roundly mocked his assertions, but perhaps they missed this. Just last May, Laredo sector Border Patrol agents arrested Syrian, Bangladeshi, and Indian nationals. In fact, his sector has apprehended 229 Bangladeshi nationals since the start of fiscal year 2018. Joining us now to discuss is Chief Jason Owens of the Laredo Sector Border Patrol. Chief Owens, does the president have it right about are not knowing what type of folks might be trying to infiltrate a mobile mob like this? I hate calling it a caravan. That's too festive. Mobile mob, I prefer. Go ahead, Chief.
No, the bottom line is, Laura, with anybody coming across the border illegally, until we can actually arrest them and talk to them, we don't know who they are and what their intent is. And it's very accurate. In my sector alone, we caught over 650 Bangladeshi nationals last year. In South Texas, last year we caught a number of gang members, convicted criminals, people from all different countries all around the world.
Well, doesn't it make sense, given what we know about terrorists wanting to exploit our loopholes? If this seems like one big giant loophole, why wouldn't they? I mean, they did it on, I mean, the fact that they haven't done it yet and blown up something in our country, okay, but we didn't think much before 9/11 about box cutters on planes, but they did that.
Well, the fact that there are loopholes in our system that allow people to bypass our laws, and the fact that there is a porous border that they're able to cross, simply makes it more feasible or more plausible that they're going to continue to exploit those weaknesses. That's why the men and women that are out there on the Border Patrol, patrolling the border each and every day, putting their life on the line to keep this country and its people safe, need that personnel, technology, and infrastructure. They need the wall, and they need Congress to act to close those loopholes so that we can enforce the laws.
I know, just, Chief, to make you smile tonight, because you're very serious, which I love. You're supposed to be. This is what happened today on The View. I'm sure you missed, so we're going to play it for you.
Is this straight up fear mongering? I mean, when did he start putting the Middle Easterners in?
Are they walking here?
Well, I don't know.
You know what? He makes up everything. He'll tell you Osama bin Laden is marching.
Well, didn't that guy dress up as James O'Keefe dress up as Osama bin Laden and actually cross the border once? Your reaction, Chief?
Well, so there are a lot of family members and people coming from Central and South America and Mexico that are coming to find a better way of life. There are also folks that have bad intent that are coming across the border that would do this country and its people harm. It's our job to protect this country, and we need those assets, those resources, that personnel to be able to do the job, and we need to be able to enforce the laws. At the end of the day, again, we don't know who's coming across until we can actually arrest them, until we can actually talk to them and find out what their intent is.
All right, Chief, thanks for the job you and all your men and women of the Border Patrol are doing. We really appreciate it. And Obama back on the trail today. Well, a surprise whopper from his Nevada appearance as tonight's last bite. Stay there. Speaking out on matters of truth versus fiction.
I believe in a fact-based reality and a fact-based politics. I don't believe in just making stuff up.
Oh, really? I seem to remember, well, just watch.
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period.
We could have been doing that all night. That's all the time we have, though, tonight. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night team take it from here on a very busy news night. Shannon.
It is. Happy Monday, Laura. Thank you very much. We begin with a Fox News alert. President Trump sounding upbeat about midterms tonight in a campaign rally with one-time bitter foe, now friend, Senator Ted Cruz. The president says the blue wave is dissipating a bit, and he is now enjoying the highest poll numbers of his presidency. We'll talk about those new numbers with senior political analyst Britt Hume. And with the midterms just 2 weeks away, President Trump shifts his focus to immigration, including tough new talk on the migrant caravan heading for the U.S. from Central America. At least 7,000, some say much larger, strong, and growing. President Trump says blame the Democrats and levels some controversial theories about who's part of the caravan. And the New York Times claims transgender could be defined out of existence by the Trump administration. But there is a whole lot more to that story. We investigate what the administration is and isn't planning to do. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin tonight with correspondent Kristen Fisher live in Houston, the scene of the latest MAGA rally. Good evening, Kristen.
Yes, Shannon, this was quite a rally tonight.